Now you're hurling. Lorna Porca with Tomás McCarthy on WLR.
Thanks to PwC Waterford.
Well, Hurling At Goals is a new book by award-winning Waterford author Conor Power. It's a period novel set in the era of professional hurling, and Conor is on the line now to tell us more. And Conor, I suppose a lot of our listeners will be familiar with you from your book on your father, Ned Power, the All-Ireland winning goalkeeper in '59 and a highly regarded coach as well. But before we talk about that, can you give us a flavour of what your latest project is all about?
Hi, Tomás. Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Yes, it's the first ever actually fictional book set in the era of professional hurling, and professional hurling went on in Ireland from around the middle of the 18th century, around 1750 in other words, and it eventually petered out sometime around kind of 1815, 1820. So my book is one that I've been writing actually for years, just on the side, and I used the time that was kind of given to me suddenly in lockdown period to finish it out. So it's almost there, and I'm using the funded, crowdfunding to get it finished. That's the hope anyway.
Yeah, and I wasn't aware that professional hurling ever existed. Conor, I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be the very same. How did you kind of stumble upon this idea?
Well, I'd had heard about it before, like many years ago. Some reference was made to it, but it was actually in the process of writing the book about my dad there 11 years ago that I found out a lot more about it, because there was one guy, and his name now escapes me and I've lost all contact with him, but he was one of a number of people who approached me after the writing of the book, just to say that they knew my dad and that they loved the book, etc. And he then showed me, the kind of layout and showed me a lot more detail. He showed me the layout of what it was like, in the professional hurling era. And he also showed me that the layout, in fact, of the team was almost exactly the same as the layout of a rugby team. And he was showing me the idea, of course, that it's actually a possibility. It's a stretch, but it's a possibility that a young William Webb Ellis would have witnessed this kind of thing going on in Ireland when he was a young kid, and he would have spent a little bit of time in Ireland when he was a young kid, and that he would have brought this idea and brought that into rugby when he got involved in rugby.
Yeah, and how did professional hurling operate during those times, Conor, from what you can gather?
Well, first of all, there were a few different versions of it. I mean, hurling is an ancient game, as we all know. It's been around for an awful long time, going back to prehistoric times maybe. But what happened was that Ireland was kind of sporting mad during the 18th century. It was the time when horse racing grew, for example, and a lot of the big houses were the ones sponsoring sporting events. So the hurling took on. It got very, very popular, and as it got more popular, more money was being placed in the outcome of people were betting on it more and more. So a number of landlords got together and decided, well, with all this money at stake, we have to make sure we have rules that everybody can understand. So it was they that came up then with rules for hurling at goals, as they called it. I know this was a different game. This was played kind of around the Kilkenny, Waterford, Carlow area, and that was the stronghold of hurling back then, as I suppose it is still today. And it was a different game where the ball was only hit on the ground up north, up in the Glens of Antrim. So they came up with the rules. When it began, there were 21 players on the team. They were laid out in formations of three. So you had a row of forwards at the scrum, and then you had a row of centres, and then you had a row of backs. And the guys at the back, then they could only hit the ball. The guys in the front were the heavy guys who were doing all the donkey work, and they could only hit the ball on the ground, whereas the backs were the ones tagging on the scores and were able to hit the ball in the air.
Very good. And Conor, you've set up a funded page in order to get this book published and sent out into the world, as it were. How can people get behind this project?
Well, if you go onto fundit.ie, fundit.ie, then you'll just have a quick look through it. You'll find my project easily enough. There's a video introduction, and there's details all about it. And really, I suppose, for people not familiar with the idea of crowdfunding, what it is that you basically ask people to fund it, but to fund a project, an artistic project of some sort. And there's no profit in it. It's simply to get an artistic project off the ground. And what people do is that they can fund it for a certain amount, and you can get rewards, and rewards in this case will be a signed copy of the book. So it's not just people putting up money and not seeing any return on it. You actually get a reward as well, and there's a whole list of different rewards as well. for people who want to put more money, for example, up to €2,000 if they want. But it can be anything. It can be €10 if people want to get involved in it. But essentially, you can kind of pre-order it. If you pay €20 and you're funding it, and you're also pre-ordering a signed copy of the book.
Very good. Well, I wish you all the best with that, Conor. And you mentioned 11 years ago you penned a book on your father, Ned Power, a hurling revolutionary. What was that experience like for you?
It was a fantastic experience, I have to say, because my father died just 2 years before that. Well, 2 years before the book came out. So let's say about a year or so after he died, I started doing it. And it was fantastic because, of course, I was going around interviewing some of his old teammates and people who knew them from years ago. Some of the guys from the 59 team as well I spoke to. And, of course, as you're doing it, it's great because, he's almost still alive while you're going through all that process. So it was a real labour of love, and it was a wonderful experience, I have to say. It really was. It was a privileged experience, and it was very well received. I think I wrote it as well to kind of make it a bit of a bite-sized kind of thing, rather than the usual approach of starting with the beginning of someone's life and going to the end. It's kind of interspersed with different aspects of him that maybe people didn't know about him. He was a comedian at home, for example. He was, he liked gardening, so I wrote different chapters on different aspects of him, and it was a fantastic experience, I have to say. And
I suppose, GA fans all around the country, Conor, will be familiar with that iconic image, the power over ring, where your father fetches the ball while Christy Ring is swinging at it. And I think Dermot Crowe wrote a nice piece about it in the Sunday Independent as well. That must make you very proud any time you see that picture.
Oh yeah, and I come across it in the oddest of places, you could say. In fact, a brother of mine, he went to Australia at some point there, maybe 20 odd years ago, and he walked into a pub in the middle of nowhere, and the first thing he saw was a picture of his father on the wall. It was an Irish pub. So it's an amazing photograph, and it crosses the divide as well in terms of sport, because I think it was Frankie Walsh, actually, the captain of that 59 team, told me a story about him going to this place in Sweden, which was a paper mill producer, was a paper pulp producer, so it was producing paper for newspapers all around Europe. But pride of place in the office when he walked into the reception was that photograph, and the girl at reception was kind of like, we have no idea what the sport is or what it refers to. We just love the photograph. Yeah,
it wasn't only a great GA image; it was a great sports image, Conor, you could say.
Yes, it was. Yeah, and it's an extraordinary photo, because nowadays you can capture it so much so easily. You just set up the camera on the sideline and you can get any kind of dramatic angle. But that was a once-off, I think, and particularly for the time, and it still stands today. It still stands the test of time.
Yeah, it sure does. And Conor, in between writing the book about your father in 2009 and the project you're working on now, what sort of work have you been involved in?
I've been doing a lot of writing in different sorts. I suppose I'm usually a travel writer, so I'm not doing a whole lot in that regard at the moment, as you can imagine.
Yes.
And and I've also done a bit of radio as well in Dublin in that regard. But I also write. I'm also a ghostwriter, and I've written 6. I'm on my 7th book now, actually, writing for other people. And most of my clients are just ordinary people who want their stories told.
Yeah, and you picked up a couple of travel writers awards as well, Conor, over the years.
I did, yes. Yeah, I was lucky enough to get a Travel Writer of the Year award in two category prizes 2 years in a row there a few years ago. And I've also won French Media Awards as well for travel writing about France, and for radio broadcast about France as well.
And just finally, Conor, where can people find out further details on all your work and your new Hurling At Goals novel?
They can find out, I suppose the best thing is to look on conorpower.ie, and there you kind of have everything about me. I've just got samples of my writing up on it, but there's also a link on the first page as well to the funded Hurling At Goals project. So if people want to get involved, they can go straight from there.
Well, Conor Power, author of Hurling At Goals, thanks a million for taking our call today.
Thank you.